Okay, let's unpack this. We've got a really fascinating deep dive today.
Mm-hmm.
It's based on a source laying out a very practical way to tackle something lots of people find tough, getting fluent in English.
Right. And specifically how you might do it without the usual routes, like moving abroad or spending a whole lot of money.
Exactly. This source shares 5 specific habits. Things one person really credits with helping them speak better, actually think in English, and just feel more confident.
And crucially, all while living in their home country, which makes it feel much more accessible, I think.
It's intriguing because the focus isn't on some huge life change, is it?
No, not at all. It's more about these small, consistent actions, daily habits, weekly practices, things you can sort of weave into the life you already have.
Yeah, subtle integration rather than a massive overhaul.
Precisely.
And here's where it gets really interesting, for me anyway. These aren't overwhelming things.
Right.
They're presented as, achievable habits, sustainable. So our mission in this deep dive is basically to walk through these 5 habits.
Okay.
Dig into the main idea for each one and see what specific bits might actually work for you listening right now.
Yeah, pull out the actionable details.
Hopefully there'll be some aha moments that could genuinely shift how you think about building fluency outside of, say, a formal classroom.
It sounds like it's all about consciously creating your own kind of immersion, right where you are, using consistency instead of relying on like big spending or being in a specific place.
Absolutely. So let's dive in. Habit number 1, start your day with English input straight away.
Okay.
The source says the very first thing they do each morning, like before checking messages or the news, is just put on something in English.
And the smart part, I thought, was how they describe stacking this habit.
Stacking. Explain that.
Well, they're not just like sitting down, forcing themselves to study first thing. They play a podcast, maybe a YouTube video, some music.
While doing other morning stuff.
Exactly. While brushing teeth, making coffee, getting dressed, things they'd be doing anyway.
Right, so it's layered onto what's already happening. That makes sense. The source explains this, helps get your brain into an English mode immediately. Makes the language feel less like a chore and more just part of the background noise of the morning, almost.
Yeah, that early low-stakes immersion seems pretty key for setting a positive tone for the day, language-wise.
It's like priming your brain, you said.
Yeah, I think so. You're signaling, okay, English is here, it's relevant today, right from the get-go, but without demanding, intense focus when you're barely awake.
Okay, good start. So moving from that passive input, the source then really emphasizes something vital for actually using the language.
Vocabulary.
Yes, building and holding on to vocabulary. Habit number 2 is reviewing vocabulary every single day.
And this hits that really common frustration, doesn't it? You learn a word one day.
Now the next.
Totally. So the source mentions using a specific tool, duo cards in their case, but presumably others work too for a dedicated review session daily.
And it's not a huge time commitment.
No, that's the point. Maybe just 10, 15 minutes. Squeeze in during a commute, maybe, or a coffee break, a quiet moment.
Okay, daily review. But there's a weekly part too, isn't there? You can't just review forever.
Exactly. You need new stuff. So while the daily bit is about locking in, once a week they mention Sunday, typically they add a batch of new words.
Where do they get these new words?
From things they encountered during the week. Maybe watching a show, reading something, even from their own writing practice we'll get to later. They make flashcards for those.
Gotcha. So add new words once a week, review everything else daily.
That's the system described. Yeah. It ensures you're constantly exposed, but also actively recalling the vocabulary you're trying to build. Structured.
That combination, review and new input, feels like a really solid way to keep your active vocabulary growing and, importantly, fresh. Now, habit number 3 is something the source calls a game changer, which is journaling in English.
Right. And what's really insightful here, I think, is the dual benefit they found.
Dual benefit.
Yeah. It helps with the language, obviously, but also with, mental well-being, self-expression.
Yeah. Interesting. How did they start? Let's just dive into writing essays.
No. Started small, just a few sentences about their day. Then it grew naturally into writing full pages. Thoughts, feelings, plans, whatever came to mind.
And they use this great phrase for it, like free speaking practice, just on paper.
I love that because you can experiment, right? Try out phrasing, build sentences, use that new vocabulary you're learning,
Without the pressure of a live conversation. No awkward pauses, no feeling embarrassed if you stumble.
Exactly. It's a safe space to practice production.
And they also mentioned looking back at old entries.
Yes. Which isn't just about, reminiscing. It gives you concrete proof of how far you've come.
Ah, you can actually see the progress.
Yeah, you see your sentences getting more complex, your vocabulary richer. You see how much better you can express yourself compared to months ago. It makes that fuzzy idea of progress really tangible.
That visual proof must be a fantastic motivator.
Okay, super useful. Let's look at habit 4. This tackles something a lot of learners worry about: accent.
Pronunciation and accent. Though, the source is careful to clarify the goal.
What's the goal then? Sounding perfectly native.
Not necessarily. It's more about clarity, just being easily understood.
Yeah.
That seems to be the focus.
Okay, practical. So how do they suggest working on it?
This habit involves setting aside time, maybe once a week or so, specifically for practicing pronunciation, actively working on it.
And the method they liked was shadowing, right?
Yeah, shadowing, which basically means listening really closely to a native speaker, maybe from a podcast, YouTube, whatever,
Yeah.
and then trying to repeat exactly what they say, mimicking not just the words, but the rhythm, the intonation, the way the sounds connect.
Ooh, that sounds like it could feel weird at first.
They totally acknowledge that. They say it feels awkward, maybe even a bit silly initially.
I can imagine. But they insist that sticking with it, that consistent practice, helps you get more comfortable with the actual physical feeling of speaking English.
Like exercising your mouth in a new way.
Sort of, yeah. And it reduces that worry about being misunderstood just because of how you sound. It's dedicated time just for the sound of the language.
Right, focusing purely on the phonetics and flow. Okay, that leaves habit number 5.
Yeah.
And the source says this one might be the toughest.
Yeah, potentially the most challenging, especially, they note, for introverts or shy people
Which is?
speaking English. Even when you feel shy or awkward,
Yeah.
actively using the language. This feels like the linchpin, really, because real fluency has to involve producing the language, not just taking it in.
True. You can listen and read forever, but speaking is different.
And the source, who identifies as shy, admitted that speaking English used to be, well, terrifying for them, but facing that fear was absolutely essential.
So how did they manage it? How do you push past that terror?
They started small, lower pressure situations first. They mentioned things like online speaking clubs.
With other learners?
Yeah, where pretty much everyone's in the same boat, Less intimidating. Then, gradually, they moved on to speaking with native speakers, maybe finding tutors or language partners on platforms like Tandem or Discord.
Ah, so finding those safer spaces to start.
Exactly. And the really powerful thing they learned,
What was that?
the fear they'd built up, worrying about being laughed at or judged harshly, was way, way worse in their head than the actual experience.
So people weren't mean.
Generally, no. They found people were usually patient, supportive, helpful even. It really highlights how often the biggest barrier is psychological.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And that accessible platforms exist now to practice in these less scary ways, at least initially.
Definitely. It's a reminder that fluency doesn't just happen. It's built by actively using the language,
Yeah.
even when it's uncomfortable. Pushing that comfort zone, bit by bit.
In environments where the stakes feel lower?
Precisely.
Okay, so let's pull this all together. What does this mean? We've looked at these 5 habits from the source. 1, starting your day with immediate English listening, just to set the tone. 2, that daily vocabulary review commitment, 10-15 minutes, maybe with a tool like Duo Cards, and adding new words weekly.
Right. Building and keeping that word bank strong.
3, using English journaling as that sort of free-speaking practice on paper, which also seems to boost confidence and self-expression.
Yeah.
4, dedicating some weekly time to accent work, focusing on clarity through methods like shadowing, making you easier to understand.
Getting comfortable with the sounds.
And 5, crucially, finding ways to push past shyness and actually speak English regularly, maybe starting with online clubs or language exchange platforms.
Facing the fear, basically.
And the source really hammers home that these practices, done consistently, help them reach fluency and feel confident without needing to move or spend a fortune.
The big takeaway seems to be about consistency and weaving English into your actual everyday life. Integration.
It really does raise an interesting question then, doesn't it? When you look at these habits, all focused on small, steady effort, using tools readily available, fitting it into existing routines, what does that suggest about what really builds fluency?
Yeah, is it the big, grand gestures we sometimes think we need, like the expensive immersion course or moving countries?
Or is it actually the sum of these simple, deliberate, daily and weekly actions, like the
Hmm.
ones we've just discussed?
What's the real power of just showing up for your learning day after day, even when it feels a bit awkward or you're feeling hesitant or shy?
Something to definitely think about as you consider which of these habits, maybe just one to start, you might feel ready to try weaving into your own routine.